The morning sun cast long shadows across the council station as Ambassador Lisa Martinez walked through the crystal corridors for the final time. Her footsteps echoed against the translucent walls, while alien beings moved around her in their daily routines. None of them knew what she carried in her briefcase would change everything. Lisa had served as Earth's representative for 12 years. She had watched human ships burn in distant battles while alien delegates offered empty words of gratitude. She had seen human colonies starve, while the council debated trade regulations that favored the wealthy core worlds. Today, all of that would end. The council chamber buzzed with its usual morning chaos. The Zephyrian delegate floated near the ceiling while his tentacles worked on 3 different data tablets. The rocky Thornians clustered in their corner, speaking in low rumbles. The elegant Altarians preened their feathers and discussed fashion trends from the inner systems. Lisa took her seat in the human section. The chairs around her sat empty because Earth could only afford to send 1 representative while other species brought dozens. This had always bothered her, but today it felt fitting. 1 human would deliver the message that would shake the galaxy. Council Chairman Vexstar called the session to order. His purple skin gleamed under the chamber lights as he announced the morning agenda. Trade disputes between the hegemony worlds, mineral rights in the Outer Ring, military budget allocations for the defense fleets. The same topics they discussed every week while real problems festered. Lisa waited through 2 hours of meaningless debate. She watched the Corellian delegate complain about shipping costs, while human freighter crews died protecting his trade routes. She listened to the Vorthan representative demand better security while human soldiers bled on a dozen frontier worlds. When Chairman Vexstar finally called for new business, Lisa stood. The chamber fell quiet as hundreds of alien eyes turned toward her. She had their attention now, but she had held it many times before. They expected another human plea for fair treatment. They expected her to ask for help or offer more sacrifices. Instead, Lisa opened her briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper. She held it up so everyone could see the official seal of Earth's government. Her voice carried clearly through the chamber when she spoke. The United Earth Government hereby withdraws from the Galactic Council, effective immediately, she said. All treaties, military agreements, and trade partnerships are terminated as of this moment. The silence stretched for several seconds before chaos erupted. Delegates shouted in dozens of languages, while others activated translation devices. Chairman Vexstar banged his ceremonial gavel, but the noise only grew louder. The Zephyrian delegate's tentacles writhed in confusion. Surely this is some mistake, he called out. Humans cannot simply leave the council. Lisa smiled for the first time in months. We can, and we are, she replied. Earth owes nothing to any member species. As of today, the Thornian representatives, rocky features twisted into what might have been concern. But who will maintain the shipping lanes, he asked. Human freighters carry 60% of all galactic cargo. That is no longer our responsibility, Lisa answered. More questions flew from around the chamber. Who would staff the medical research stations where human scientists developed cures for alien diseases? Who would patrol the dangerous border regions where human ships formed the backbone of every fleet? Who would manage the complex logistics networks that kept the galactic economy running? Lisa had the same answer for all of them. Not our problem anymore. Chairman Vexstar finally restored some order to the chamber. His purple face had turned darker with what Lisa recognized as anger. Ambassador Martinez, he said through gritted teeth, perhaps we should discuss this in private session. There is nothing to discuss, Lisa replied. The decision has been made. She looked around the chamber at faces that showed confusion, fear, and growing panic. These beings had grown comfortable with human sacrifice. They expected humans to volunteer for every dangerous mission, to work the hardest jobs for the lowest pay, to die in wars that protected alien interests. For 3 centuries, humanity has served this council faithfully, Lisa continued. We have fought your wars, explored your frontiers, and solved your problems. We have asked for very little in return. The Altarian delegate ruffled her silver feathers. Humans have been well compensated for their services, she protested. Lisa laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. Compensated, she repeated. We asked for trade preferences to help our struggling colonies. Denied. We requested military support when raiders attacked our outer settlements. Denied. We begged for medical supplies during the new Tokyo plague outbreak. Denied. She pulled out another document from her briefcase. But when the Krillian plague threatened, the core world's humanity sent every available medical team. When the Nexus pirates raided the trade routes, human ships formed 90% of the response fleet. When the quantum communication grid failed, human engineers worked without sleep for 6 months to repair it. The chamber had grown quiet again. Lisa could see recognition dawning on many faces. They were beginning to understand what humanity's departure would mean. The pattern is clear, Lisa said. Humanity gives everything and receives nothing. Today that ends. Chairman Vextar leaned forward in his ornate chair. Surely we can reach some accommodation, he said. The council values human participation. No, Lisa replied firmly. You value human sacrifice. There's a difference. She gathered her papers and closed her briefcase. Captain Thompson is waiting to escort me back to Earth. All human personnel will be evacuated from council facilities within 72 hours. The Vorthan representative spoke up for the first time. Her crystalline voice chimed with worry. The consequences of this action could be severe for all species. Lisa paused at the chamber door. Yes, she said quietly. They could be. Perhaps you should have considered that before taking us for granted. She walked out without looking back. Behind her, the chamber erupted into panicked voices as delegates finally began to grasp what they had lost. The steady, reliable humans who fixed every problem and fought every battle were leaving. The species that asked for nothing but gave everything had finally had enough. Captain Jake Thompson waited by the shuttle bay, as promised. His weathered face showed no surprise when Lisa emerged from the council chamber ahead of schedule. He had known this day would come eventually. How did they take it? He asked as they walked toward the waiting shuttle. About as well as expected, Lisa replied. Lots of shouting and denial. The shuttle bay doors opened to reveal the USS Liberty waiting to take them home. Chief Engineer Maria Santos ran her final checks while Communications Officer Peter Collins prepared the departure sequence. They had all volunteered for this mission knowing they might never return to Council space. As the shuttle lifted off from the station, Lisa looked down at the massive structure that had been humanity's window to the stars for 3 centuries. It was beautiful in its alien way, with crystalline spires and organic curves that defied human architectural principles. But beauty could not hide the ugly truth of what the Council had become, a parasitic organization that survived by exploiting the goodwill and sacrifice of its most dedicated members. Well, no more. The journey back to Earth would take 2 weeks. By the time they arrived, word of humanity's withdrawal would have spread throughout the galaxy. The real consequences would begin soon after. Lisa settled back in her seat and closed her eyes. She had done her job. Now it was time to go home and let the galaxy figure out how to survive without the humans who had carried it for so long. 6 months passed since Ambassador Lisa Martinez walked out of the council chamber, and the galaxy began to crack like old stone. Director Kate Williams had run the Galactic Trade Commission with quiet efficiency for 15 years, but now her replacement struggled with systems she had made look effortless. The new trade director was a proud Altarian named Silverwing of Commerce, who believed alien superiority would easily fill the human void. His first week in charge brought disaster when 3 major shipping routes collapsed due to scheduling conflicts that Kate had prevented through careful coordination. Cargo ships waited for days at transfer stations while bureaucrats argued over priorities. The elegant mathematical formulas that Kate had used to balance supply and demand across 12 sectors meant nothing to beings who had never bothered to learn them. Food rotted in storage bays while hungry colonies went without supplies. Commander Ryan Davis had led the 47th Human Defense Fleet until the withdrawal order came through. His ships had patrolled the dangerous border regions where pirates and raiders tested Council defenses. Without human crews to maintain their vigilance watch, those same space lanes became hunting grounds for criminals. The Nexus Reapers struck first, hitting a convoy of thorny and merchant vessels near the Kalar system. The attack should have been stopped by patrol ships that Ryan's fleet had positioned strategically throughout the sector. Instead, the replacement Zephyrian commander had pulled his forces back to safer positions, leaving the merchants defenseless. 18 cargo ships burned in space, while their crews died screaming distress calls that no one answered. The pirates took what they wanted and left the wreckage as a message. The humans were gone, and the galaxy had become a much more dangerous place. Dr. Helen Foster's quantum communication research had revolutionized how the galaxy stayed connected. Her breakthrough discoveries allowed instant messaging across vast distances, making trade and diplomacy possible on a galactic scale. But the systems required constant maintenance and upgrades that only human engineers fully understood. The first communication grid failure hit the outer rim colonies where human technician Carl Wright had been working on critical improvements. When the humans left, Carl took his research with him, leaving behind equipment that alien engineers could operate but not repair. Messages that once traveled instantly across the galaxy now took days or weeks to reach their destinations. Emergency communications failed when rescue teams needed them most. The careful coordination that kept billions of beings connected began to unravel, thread by thread. On the industrial world of Kepler, Prime Factory Supervisor Linda Baker had maintained production levels that other species found impossible to match. Her teams worked with mechanical precision, turning raw materials into finished goods that supplied half the galaxy's manufacturing needs. The Carillion Replacement Supervisor Buzz Efficiency arrived with great confidence and modern automation ideas. He believed alien technology could easily replace human intuition and experience. Within 3 weeks, production had dropped by 60% as automated systems failed to adapt to changing conditions. Workers who had learned to trust human judgment now struggled with alien management styles that prioritized protocol over results. Machines broke down without human mechanics who could diagnose problems by sound and feel. The steady rhythm of galactic industry began to stutter and slow. The Galactic Council convened emergency sessions, but pride prevented most delegates from admitting their mistake. Chairman Vextar insisted that temporary disruptions were normal during any transition period. Other species would adapt and fill the gaps left by human departure. Counselor Sharpclaw Victory from the Hegemony Worlds declared that humanity's contributions had been overrated anyway. We survived for millions of years before humans joined the Council, he announced during one heated debate. We will survive without them. But survival and prosperity were different things, and the galaxy was learning that lesson the hard way. The complex web of systems that humans had built and maintained over 3 centuries could not be replaced with speeches and good intentions. Meanwhile on Earth, President George Turner addressed his cabinet about humanity's new direction. The withdrawal from galactic politics had freed up enormous resources for domestic development. Human colonies that had struggled under Council taxation were now thriving under Earth's direct support. Captain Sandra Murphy commanded merchant vessels that had once served Council trade routes. Now her ships carried goods between human worlds, building an independent economy that owed nothing to alien bureaucrats. Her crews reported higher morale and better pay than they had ever received working for galactic corporations. Engineer Tony Clark supervised the construction of new orbital shipyards around Luna. Without Council regulations limiting human military development, these facilities could build the advanced warships that Earth's defense forces needed. Human technology was advancing faster than it had in decades. The first refugee ships began arriving at human settlements 6 months after the withdrawal. These were not official diplomatic missions, but desperate traders and colonists who could no longer survive in council space. Human administrators like Governor Rachel Stone welcomed them, but made clear that Earth's neutrality came first. Some refugees brought troubling news from the galactic core. The Krillian plague that human doctors had sacrificed their lives to cure was showing signs of mutation. Without Dr. Susan White's research teams to monitor and adapt treatments, the new strain might prove resistant to existing vaccines. Financial markets that human economists like Professor John Mitchell had carefully stabilized were experiencing wild swings as confidence evaporated. The galactic credit had lost 30% of its value against human currency as traders recognized which economy was actually stable. Agricultural worlds faced their own crisis as crop management systems, designed by human specialists, began failing. Director Nancy Thompson had optimized food production across dozens of worlds, but her replacement could not understand the complex environmental factors that made her methods work. Harvest yields dropped sharply on worlds that had fed billions for generations. Weather prediction models failed without human meteorologists who understood planetary climate patterns. Famines that had been eliminated by human agricultural science began returning to worlds that had forgotten hunger. The Council's attempts to replace human expertise with artificial intelligence proved disastrous. Computer systems could follow programmed instructions but lacked the creative problem-solving that humans brought naturally to every task. When unexpected situations arose, the machines simply stopped working and waited for guidance that never came. Some species began reaching out privately to human colonies, offering lucrative contracts for essential services. Dr. Amy Rodriguez found herself in high demand as alien governments desperately sought medical expertise. Engineer Rob Martinez received offers that tripled his old council salary from worlds whose infrastructure was crumbling. But Earth's government maintained strict neutrality. These were individual business arrangements, not official diplomatic contacts. Humanity would help where possible but would not return to the old pattern of sacrifice and exploitation. The galaxy was beginning to understand what it had lost when the humans walked away quietly. The steady, reliable workers who had kept civilization running were gone, and no amount of pride could replace their unique contributions. The real consequences were only just beginning to show themselves as the foundation of galactic society started cracking without human hands to maintain it. 2 years had passed since humanity walked away from the Galactic Council and the galaxy was dying by degrees. What started as minor inconveniences had grown into catastrophic failures that threatened entire civilizations. The Krillian plague returned first, striking the industrial world of Vega 7. Where millions of workers lived in crowded manufacturing districts. Dr. Susan White had given her life developing the original cure, along with thousands of human medical researchers who died testing treatments on themselves. Their sacrifice had saved billions across dozens of species, but the virus had mutated during its dormant period. The new strain resisted every known treatment and spread faster than anyone had expected. The Altarian medical teams tried to recreate Dr. White's research, but they lacked her intuitive understanding of viral behavior. Human doctors like Amy Rodriguez had built on Susan's work for decades, learning to predict and counter each new mutation. Without that accumulated knowledge, the galaxy's medical establishment could only watch helplessly as the plague spread. Quarantine procedures that had worked against the original strain failed completely. The new plague jumped species barriers that had previously contained it, moving from Altarians to Thornians to Zephyrians with equal ease. Within 6 months, it had reached the core worlds, where the Council's elite lived in luxury, paid for by human sacrifice. The economic collapse accelerated as panic gripped the major trade centers. Financial systems that Professor John Mitchell had balanced through careful analysis of market forces spun out of control. His replacement, a crystalline Vorthan named Song of Numbers, understood mathematics but not the psychological factors that drove galactic markets. Currency exchanges that had operated smoothly for centuries began experiencing violent swings as traders lost confidence in the Council's ability to maintain stability. The galactic credit fell to half its former value against independent currencies, while inflation ravaged worlds that depended on imported goods. Major corporations that had relied on human management found themselves unable to adapt to changing conditions. The elegant efficiency that human administrators brought to complex operations could not be replicated by beings who had never learned to think beyond rigid protocols. Pirates grew bolder as Council military forces proved inadequate for basic security duties. The Void Reapers had grown from a small band of criminals into a massive fleet that terrorized entire sectors. Without human tactical expertise to counter their movements, they struck at will, taking what they wanted and leaving destruction in their wake. Commander Beth Anderson had led patrol groups that kept the Reapers contained through superior strategy and unwavering determination. Her replacement, a proud hegemony officer named Clav Victory, relied on brute force tactics that the pirates easily countered. Every engagement ended in Council defeat as alien commanders proved unable to match human adaptability. The research stations where human scientists had pushed the boundaries of galactic knowledge went dark one by one. The quantum fold drive project that Dr. Gary Lewis had pioneered remained frozen without his team's continued input. Breakthrough technologies that could have revolutionized space travel were abandoned because no other species could understand the theoretical frameworks that humans had developed. Exploration of new systems ground to a halt, as alien crews lacked both the courage and ingenuity to venture into unknown territories. Human explorers like Captain Victor Stone had mapped thousands of systems while other species preferred the safety of known space lanes. Without human pioneers to lead the way, galactic expansion simply stopped. Agricultural worlds faced widespread famine as crop management systems failed across multiple sectors. The carefully balanced ecosystems that Director Nancy Thompson had created required constant adjustment to maintain optimal yields. Her alien replacement followed the documented procedures, but could not adapt when unexpected problems arose. Weather patterns that human meteorologists had predicted and compensated for caught alien farmers completely unprepared. Droughts struck worlds that should have been ready while floods destroyed crops that could have been saved with proper timing. Billions faced starvation as food production collapsed across the galaxy. The Council's desperate attempts to replace human contributions with automated systems failed spectacularly in every sector. Artificial intelligence could follow programmed instructions, but lacked the creative problem-solving that humans applied naturally to complex situations. When unexpected challenges arose, the machines simply waited for guidance that never came. Some species began reaching out directly to human colonies, offering unprecedented terms for essential services. The proud Thornians, who had once dismissed human workers as inferior, now begged for human engineers to repair their failing infrastructure. Wages offered to human specialists rose to levels that would have been unthinkable during Council membership. Engineer Rob Martinez found himself commanding fees that exceeded his old salary by a factor of 10. Alien governments competed desperately for his services as their own technical experts proved unable to maintain systems that humans had designed. But individual contracts could not address the systemic collapse that was spreading throughout galactic civilization. Medical researcher Julie Adams received offers from species that had previously refused to work with human doctors. The same beings who had claimed superiority over human medical knowledge now pleaded for her help as their populations died from diseases that human medicine could have easily cured. But Earth's government maintained its policy of strict neutrality. President Turner's administration would not be drawn back into the old pattern of exploitation, no matter how desperate the galactic situation became. Individual humans could accept private contracts, but there would be no official return to a council membership. Meanwhile, human civilization thrived in isolation from the galactic chaos. Independent colonies managed by administrators like Governor Rachel Murphy had grown prosperous through self-reliance and innovation. Human trade networks operated efficiently, under the guidance of experienced captains like Sandra Murphy, who had learned to succeed without alien bureaucracy. Human scientists like Dr. Karen Phillips made breakthrough discoveries without council regulations hindering their research. Military forces remained small, but highly effective under leaders like Colonel Danny Lewis, who understood that quality mattered more than quantity. The human economy grew stronger each year, as resources once wasted on galactic obligations were redirected toward domestic development. Refugee ships arrived daily at human settlements carrying beings who had lost everything to the spreading chaos. Captain Melissa Scott commanded humanitarian vessels that rescued survivors from failed worlds, but Earth maintained strict limits on immigration. Humanity would help where possible, but would not sacrifice their own stability for alien welfare. The council chambers, where Ambassador Lisa Martinez had announced humanity's withdrawal, now echoed with desperate voices as delegates blamed each other for the growing crisis. Chairman Vextar's authority crumbled as species after species began withdrawing from council. Agreements to focus on their own survival. Some delegates finally admitted what they had refused to acknowledge for 2 years. Humanity had not been just another member species but the foundation upon which galactic civilization depended. Their quiet competence had held everything together, while other beings took credit and reaped benefits. The galaxy was learning a harsh lesson about the value of those who ask for little, but give everything. Humanity had walked away quietly, but their absence roared louder than any declaration of war. 5 years after humanity walked away from the Galactic Council, the ancient enemy returned from the darkness between stars. The Zarian Empire had watched from the galactic rim for centuries, waiting for the moment when their greatest obstacle would be removed. They had studied human warfare extensively, but now they faced a galaxy without human defenders. Admiral Kethfer commanded the first Zarian invasion fleet that emerged from hyperspace near the border systems. His massive dreadnoughts had been built specifically to counter human tactical innovations and crew adaptability. But the council forces that met his advance lacked everything that had once made human fleets so formidable. General Patricia Ales had commanded council defenses for 20 years before the withdrawal. Her strategies had kept the Zarians contained through superior positioning and unpredictable maneuvers. The alien generals who replaced her followed standard military doctrine that the Zarians had studied and prepared counters 4 decades ago. The first battle at Kepler Station lasted only 4 hours. Council Admiral Thunderwing of War lead 300 ships against the Zarian advance force, expecting his numerical advantage to carry the day. He had never learned the human principle that battles were won by brains, not numbers. The Zarians swept through the council formation like a blade through smoke. Their ships moved in patterns that exploited every weakness in standard alien tactics, while council forces responded with predictable maneuvers that accomplished nothing. 300 ships became wreckage in space, while the Zarian fleet suffered minimal losses. News of the defeat sent shockwaves through the remaining council worlds. Species that had dismissed human military contributions suddenly realized what they had lost. Commander Frank Cooper had trained alien officers for decades, but they had learned procedures without understanding the creative thinking that made those procedures effective. The Zarian advance continued with devastating efficiency. Systems that should have taken months to conquer fell in weeks, as council defenses crumbled at first contact. The mathematical precision of alien military planning proved worthless against enemies who had spent centuries preparing for exactly this kind of warfare. On Altair Prime, the Planetary Defense Force tried to implement human defensive strategies that General Hayes had developed years earlier, but they followed the written plans without understanding the principles behind them. When the Xerians adapted their attack patterns, the defenders could not respond with the flexible thinking that humans brought naturally to every engagement. The economic systems that had struggled for years finally collapsed completely under the pressure of total war. The galactic credit became worthless paper as trade networks disintegrated and industrial worlds fell to invasion. Refugees flooded the remaining council territories, carrying nothing but stories of defeat and destruction. Financial markets that Professor John Mitchell had stabilized through careful analysis ceased to exist as panic replaced any pretense of rational decision-making. The elegant mathematical models that human economists had used to predict and prevent market crashes meant nothing when civilization itself was under attack. Meanwhile, human colonies thrived in their isolation from the galactic chaos. President Turner had relocated the capital to New Geneva, where Earth's government continued its policy of strict neutrality. Human military forces remained small, but their training and equipment had advanced significantly during the 5 years of independence. Admiral Sarah Chen commanded the Earth Defense Fleet from her flagship, the UES Independence. Her ships incorporated technologies that the Council had banned or restricted during humanity's membership, without alien bureaucrats limiting human innovation. The fleet had become the most advanced fighting force in known space. Human colonies were defended by governors like Rachel Murphy, who had learned to combine civilian leadership with military necessity. Their worlds operated efficient economies that produced everything needed for defense, while maintaining the high quality of life that humans had always valued above alien measures of success. The contrast between human prosperity and galactic chaos became more obvious each day. Human scientists like Dr. Karen Phillips continued making breakthrough discoveries while alien research facilities fell to Xerian bombardment. Human agricultural worlds produced surplus food while council planets faced starvation. Some desperate council species began offering enormous bribes for human military assistance. The proud Thornians, who had once demanded respect from human officers, now begged for protection from human fleets. But Earth's government maintained its neutrality despite increasingly desperate pleas from former allies. Captain Melissa Scott's humanitarian ships continued rescuing refugees from destroyed worlds, but Earth imposed strict limits on immigration. Humanity would help where possible, but would not sacrifice their own security for the beings who had taken human sacrifice for granted for 3 centuries. The Xerian advance reached the inner systems where council member species had lived in luxury built on human labor and sacrifice. The elegant crystal cities of the Vorthon collapsed under Xerian bombardment while their inhabitants fled in overcrowded transport ships toward uncertain sanctuary. Chairman Vextar's government ceased to function as member species withdrew from council agreements to focus on their own survival. The Grand Alliance that had ruled the galaxy for 1,000 years dissolved into competing factions that blamed each other for the disaster that human withdrawal had made inevitable. Some alien leaders finally acknowledged the truth that pride had prevented them from admitting for 5 years. The Altarian delegate Silverwing of Sro issued a public statement admitting that her species had been wrong to take human contributions for granted. But acknowledgement came too late to change the outcome of battles already lost. The Xer had studied human tactical innovations for centuries, but they fought against council forces that had never learned to think like humans. Battle after battle ended the same way, with alien commanders following predictable patterns while Xerian forces adapted and overcame every challenge through superior flexibility. Entire civilizations that had existed for millions of years faced extinction because they had never learned the human virtues of creativity, courage, and determination. The beings who had claimed superiority over humanity discovered that survival required more than advanced technology or ancient wisdom. As the 5th anniversary of humanity's departure approached, the galaxy burned with the fires of conquest and collapse. The Xerian Empire controlled half the known systems, while the remainder struggled with plague, famine, and economic ruin. Only human space remained stable and prosperous, protected by the same qualities that had once kept the entire galaxy safe. The council that had dismissed human contributions as adequate at best now faced the consequences of losing the one species that had held their civilization together through quiet competence and unwavering dedication. The galaxy had learned too late that walking away quietly could be the loudest statement of all. 7 years after humanity walked away from the Galactic Council, the desperate survivors finally swallowed their pride. Ambassador Lisa Martinez returned to what remained of the council chambers, but this time she came as humanity's equal, not their servant. The Grand Hall that had once hosted hundreds of delegates now held barely 50 representatives from species that had avoided extinction. The negotiations took place on the neutral station of Haven Point, where human diplomats had agreed to meet with council survivors. Lisa sat across from beings who had once looked down on humanity as useful, but inferior. Now their eyes showed the hollow desperation of creatures who had lost everything through their own arrogance. Former Chairman Vexstar had died when the Z destroyed the council headquarters. His replacement was a broken Altarian named Crystal Song Vergret, whose silver feathers had turned gray with stress. She spoke for what remained of the galactic government that had once ruled 1,000 systems, but now controlled barely a dozen refugee camps. The Thornian representative was a scarred veteran named Stoneheart Dovesorrow, who had watched his homeworld burn from orbit as Zarian fleets reduced mountains to rubble. The proud warrior race that had once dismissed human military tactics now begged for protection from human ships and crews. Charles Anderson led the human diplomatic team with the cold professionalism of someone who had watched former allies suffer the consequences of their own choices. He had served under Lisa Martinez during the original withdrawal and remembered every insult, every dismissal that had led to this moment. The terms humanity offered were simple but absolute. Full partnership in any new galactic organization with humans holding veto power over all major decisions. Fair compensation for all services provided at rates determined by human economists, not alien bureaucrats. Complete autonomy for human colonies, and trade routes without interference from any galactic authority. Most importantly, humanity would never again bear the burden of galactic security alone. Other species would contribute equally to military operations or receive no protection from human forces. The days of human sacrifice for alien benefit were over forever. Some survivors objected. Despite having no bargaining power whatsoever, the Vorthon delegate Crystal Voice of Defiance claimed that humanity was taking advantage of temporary difficulties. She insisted that the galaxy would recover without human help and that the proposed terms were unreasonable. Charles Anderson listened to her complaints with the patience of someone who held all the advantages. When she finished speaking, he simply activated a holographic display that showed the current state of galactic civilization. 70% of inhabited systems had fallen to the Zerines. The remaining worlds struggled with plague, famine, and economic collapse. "These are not temporary difficulties," he said quietly. "This is the permanent result of taking humanity for granted." Trade specialist Linda Davis presented the economic analysis that made the situation clear. The galaxy had lost not just human workers but the entire foundation of interstellar commerce. Without human logistics networks and management expertise, the survivors could not even feed themselves properly. Human rescue fleets commanded by officers like Captain Emma Wilson had saved more lives during the past 2 years than all other species combined. Human medical teams led by doctors like Paul Murphy had contained plague outbreaks that alien physicians could not even identify. Human engineers like Roy Clark had restored basic functionality to systems across a dozen worlds. The evidence was overwhelming, but some delegates still clung to their old prejudices. The hegemony representative Sharp-Claw's stubbornness insisted that his species had never needed human assistance. He claimed that temporary setbacks would be overcome through superior alien determination. Charles Anderson smiled without warmth. as he presented footage of Sharpclaw's homeworld. The proud hegemony capital was now a lifeless rock, where Zarian weapons had sterilized every trace of civilization. The delegate's own family had died in the bombardment while he attended useless council meetings that accomplished nothing. "Your determination is impressive," Charles said. "But determination without capability is just noise." The negotiations continued for weeks, as human diplomats demonstrated the harsh reality of the new galactic order. Humanity had spent 7 years building an independent civilization that owed nothing to alien approval. Human technology had advanced beyond anything the Council had possessed, while their military forces had become the most effective fighting organization in known space. Captain Jake Thompson commanded the human fleet that protected Haven Point from Zarian raiders. His ships represented technology that former Council species could barely understand, let alone reproduce. The aliens who had once restricted human military development now depended on human protection for their very survival. The final treaty was signed by Director Alice Patterson, representing Earth's interests, and Crystal Song of Regret, speaking for the Council remnants. The document established humanity as the senior partner in any future galactic organization with authority that reflected their actual contributions rather than alien prejudices. Some species refused to accept the new reality and withdrew from the negotiations entirely. The remaining Vorthan enclaves declared they would rather face extinction than submit to human authority. Their pride lasted exactly 3 weeks before Zarian fleets reduced their last stronghold to radioactive dust. Others learned faster and began adapting to the new order. The surviving Thornians placed themselves under human protection and began learning human military doctrines. The refugee Altarians accepted human economic guidance and slowly began rebuilding their shattered civilization. The galaxy that emerged from 7 years of chaos bore little resemblance to the arrogant alliance that had dismissed human contributions. Entire species had vanished while others survived only as small populations scattered across human-protected worlds. The Grand Council chambers lay in ruins, while new meetings took place in simple human-built stations. Admiral Sarah Chen's fleets began pushing back against Zarian forces, using tactics that combined human innovation with hard-earned experience. The ancient enemy found themselves facing opponents who could match their adaptability, while possessing superior technology and unbreakable determination. As humanity took its rightful place as the galaxy's senior partner, Lisa Martinez reflected on the lessons learned through tragedy and loss. The quiet competence that aliens had taken for granted was now recognized as the foundation of interstellar civilization. The species that asked for little, but gave everything, had finally received the respect they had always deserved. The council chamber fell silent as she delivered the closing words of the new era. Humanity has returned, but we return as leaders, not servants. The galaxy's survival depends on remembering that distinction. The beings who had once dismissed human contributions as adequate at best now understood that survival itself depended on human guidance and protection. They had learned, too late, that walking away quietly could indeed be the loudest statement of all.